It is absolutely amazing how many people wrongly believed that Alex Jones was kicked off of Twitter for things he never actually said about Sandy Hook. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned Florida rumbler with Viva, and he is sniffing the fresh Florida air. It's beautiful today. It's like one of those days where it's actually not too hot to do a car vlog. And my goodness, Alex Jones has been let back on Twitter by Elon Musk. And you would think that it was the end of the world, and to a great many people who are ill-informed, misinformed, or propagandists, it is in fact a bit of the end of the world. The news of the weekend and what is going to be the news of the week: Alex Jones back on Twitter. Elon Musk Saturday, I think, put out a Twitter poll: should he let Voldemort back on the platform? He'd abide by the results of the vote. It was 70-30 from what I understand, and lo and behold, whatever the Latin expression is, the people have spoken, Vox Day, whatever. Elon Musk allowed InfoWars, Alex Jones, Owen Schroyer back on the platform. People are having an absolute meltdown, and what's becoming abundantly clear:
people are idiots.
I'm not saying that to insult the people who are not idiots. I'm actually not even saying it to insult the people who are idiots. I'm just highlighting the fact that people are idiots. They're ill-informed, misinformed, or they in fact know the truth and are spouting off lies. But the amount of people who think wrongly that Alex Jones was initially booted from Twitter for things he said about Sandy Hook, many of those things he never actually said about Sandy Hook, it's astonishing. Most people don't know that his third strike, Alex Jones's third strike, was a video in which he confronted Oliver Darcy in line at Congress for some hearing. That was the third strike, and if you don't believe me, believe it from the lips of whoever the attorney was at the time, I forget her name, and Jack Dorsey, when they appeared on Joe Rogan with Tim Pool. They laid out exactly why Alex Jones was booted from the platform, and it's because in the mind, in the ears, in the brain, the demented, twisted brain of the lawyer, what Alex Jones said sounded like it could be perceived as potentially maybe being a call to violence when he remorselessly mocked, and rightly so, Oliver Darcy.
You have to look at the full context and the spectrum here.
So what was it that made you ban him?
So there were 3 separate incidents that came to our attention after the fact that were reported to us by different users. There was a video that was uploaded that showed a child being violently thrown to the ground and crying. So that was the first one. The second one was a video that we viewed as incitement of violence. I can read it to you. It's a little bit of a transcript, but now it's time to act on the enemy before they do a false flag. I know the Justice Department's crippled, a bunch of followers and cowards, but there's groups, there's grand juries, you called for it. It's time politically, economically, and judiciously, and legally, and criminally to move against these people. It's got to be done now. Get together the people you know aren't traitors, aren't cowards, aren't hedging their frickin' bets like all these other assholes do, and let's go, let's do it. So people need to have and then there's a bunch of other stuff, but at the end, so people need to have their battle rifles ready and everything ready at their bedsides, and you've got to be ready because the media is so disciplined in their deception.
So this is, you're saying that this is a call to violence against the media? That's
what it sounded like to us at the time. And there have been a number of incidents of violence against the media. And again, I take my responsibility for what happens on the platform and how that translates off platform very seriously. And that felt like it was an incitement to violence. So the third strike that we looked at was a verbal altercation that Alex got into with a journalist. And in that altercation, which was uploaded to Twitter, there were a number of statements using eyes of the rat, even more evil-looking person. He is just scum. You're a virus to America and freedom, smelling like a possum that climbed out of the rear end of a dead cow. You look like a possum that got caught doing some really, really nasty stuff, in my view. So there was a bunch of
That's
verbal,
enough? Really? That's hilarious.
Pattern and practice, but it was a verbal altercation that was posted on our platform.
So if you haven't actually seen the video in which Alex Jones confronts, and rightly so, Oliver Darcy, have a look at that as well.
Look at those eyes, folks. If you want to see the eyes of a rat, seriously, just look at the camera. Look at those eyes. Look at that slobbering to the system and the criminals at CNN, all their warmongering and death and all their fake news, and then running around trying to police the internet and try to shut people down. And then you think people are so stupid. On CNN a week later, you say no one's censoring anybody, no one's pushing for censoring, and then you say that Trump is the one attacking the press when all he does is stand up to your lies. Just look at this guy's eyes, man. That is who will rule your life. Him and people like Stelter. That is who want to look at that smile.
So bottom line, Alex Jones was never actually booted from Twitter for things he said about Sandy Hook, and many people believe that he said things that he never actually said about Sandy Hook. Many people are under the false impression, partly because of the propaganda that was run for years by the likes of New York Times, that Alex Jones dedicated years of InfoWars defaming the parents of Sandy Hook, spreading lies and rumors about Sandy Hook. Most people don't know that over the course of InfoWars history, I think Alex Jones might have spent 16 to 22 minutes talking about Sandy Hook in total, given the fact that he goes live 5 days a week, hours a day. The best they came up with in that trial was a 16 to 22 minute montage of things he said, all of which he apologized for, some of which were not even necessarily factually incorrect because they're matters of opinion, but people are under the wrong impression that he dedicated years of InfoWars to slandering the parents. Not the case. And if you had any doubts about the things that he is alleged to have said, or the things he said about Sandy Hook, don't take it from me, take it from the New York Times. From an article from September 22nd, 2022, Mr. Jones' Sandy Hook commentary went on for years. Here is a small sampling of what he said. The wonderful thing about propaganda and liars is that they speak the truth while spouting lies. While it might be true that it went on for years, that might be because in 2016 he said something and in 2018 he said something else. So technically, two statements separated by years is nonetheless technically correct that he said these things over years. But when the New York Times says, here's a small sample of some of the things that Alex Jones says, what that actually translates into is, here is the best of anything that we could find, because if they had anything more damning than what they included in that article, they would have included it in that article. This is not a small sampling of what Alex Jones said over a period of years. It's the best of what they could group together so as to justify a $1 billion judgment, a judgment by default verdict, by the way. We're going to get there in a second. This is the best of, and wait till you go through the best of, i.e. the worst things that the New York Times says Alex Jones said about Sandy Hook. Quote, my gut is, with the timing and everything that happened, this is staged. And you know, I've been saying the last few months, get ready for big mass shootings, and then magically it happens, end quote. Now, you know what's particularly egregious about this allegedly defamatory, shocking statement that Alex Jones made about Sandy Hook? It is predicated on the fact that Sandy Hook actually happened. He's just disagreeing as to the potential motivation, the underlying contributing factors to it. It's predicated on the idea that Sandy Hook happened, and yet one of the most prominent critiques, attacks against Alex Jones is that he denied that Sandy Hook happened. Quote, folks, we got to get private investigators up to Sandy Hook right now because I'm telling you, this stinks to the highest heaven, end quote. Quote, we're sorry for everybody's losses, whatever. We're investigating this though, end quote. Another statement, the best that New York Times could find, the best that they could find in the context of that sham of a trial, in which Alex Jones recognizes that it happened, in which he openly states that it happened, and yet people are under the false impression that Alex Jones spent years denying that Sandy Hook ever happened. And I'll go on with a few more, and you can read it in the screen grab yourself.
Quote, you've got parents laughing, ha ha ha, and then they walk over the camera and go boo hoo hoo, and not just one, but a bunch of parents doing this, and then photos of kids that are still alive they said died. I mean, they think we're so dumb. Quote, why did Hitler blow up the Reichstag? To get control. Why do governments stage these things? To get our guns. Why can't people get that through their head? Quote, I watched the footage and it looked like a drill, end quote.
So to recap, Alex Jones was actually not kicked off of Twitter for anything he said about Sandy Hook. He was kicked off of Twitter for the third strike, being that he accosted Oliver Darcy in the halls of Congress, and yet everybody thinks he was kicked off because he denied that Sandy Hook ever happened. And despite what everyone thinks he said or might have said about Sandy Hook, as you've seen from that New York Times article and that sham of a trial, those are the things that Alex Jones said about Sandy Hook, 90% of which are predicated on the fact that it did in fact happen, setting aside the fact that he did openly, repeatedly apologize for the false statements, the limited amount of false statements that he made as relates to Sandy Hook. Which brings us to the sham of a trial. People are under the false impression that Alex Jones was convicted and found guilty after a trial. That really couldn't be further from the truth as far as it goes. Judicially speaking, Alex Jones never had a trial. He was found guilty by default verdict for alleged violations of discovery obligations. There was no evidence adduced to prove his guilt or hold him liable in front of a jury. The judge came in and said, you defaulted allegedly on your discovery obligations, guilty by default verdict. They never went to a jury. They never adduced evidence. And why is that relevant? Well, there were very thorny legal questions in this case as to whether or not the people about whom Alex Jones spoke were public figures, where they had to prove actual malice. There were statute of limitations issues in this case, all of which were bypassed by the default verdict. And some people out there, ignorant, ill-informed, or propagandists, are still saying Alex Jones was found guilty. Yeah, the court declared him guilty. Yeah, these activist judges declared him guilty so they could bypass a trial on on the merits. And the only trial they had was a trial to determine how much he was going to pay now that he was found guilty by default verdict. And how much was he ordered to pay?
$1 billion.
And not just to the parents of the children who were killed during that massacre. He was ordered to pay $80 million to an FBI agent who did not have any family killed in that attack, but an FBI agent who was allegedly defamed, traumatized by things Alex Jones said about him. So that's who Alex Jones was ordered to pay tens of millions of dollars to after being found guilty by default verdict, where the only trial they had was in front of a hand-selected group of jurors. I was there when they were selecting them in Austin. A group of jurors who were primed to say, how much are you going to order him to pay? Because he's already guilty, and we want to know if you're susceptible, amenable to ordering him to pay in the orders of hundreds of millions or $1 billion in damages for defamation. Now, people on Twitter are having an absolute meltdown because of all of this. They don't understand what's going on. They think they know things that are wrong. They don't understand the truth. They think Alex Jones is a danger. And I've got to tell you, some of the tweets coming out are themselves the actual danger. Here is one beauty, one gem.
If you want to talk about dog whistles,
one dog whistle that is worthy of a banning on Twitter, coming courtesy of David Levitt.
How many innocent people will be murdered because @Elon Musk allowed Alex Jones back in Twitter?
And speaking of others spouting propaganda and disinformation, here's a tweet that I felt compelled to reply to because the amount of disinformation, ignorance, propaganda in it is truly astonishing. But this is the tweet, and I'll read you my response in response to what you know what I mean.
He's back. Elon Musk went through with reinstating Alex Jones to Twitter. Sandy Hook happened, parents lost their kids, Alex Jones attacked them daily, his followers harassed the parents, the court decided this fact. I don't know why I'm surprised by his supporters. They won't do anything to stop school shootings. Of course they think Sandy Hook was set up by the FBI or whatever their angle is. Elon flip-flops on his principles for money. Quote, I have no mercy for anyone who would use the death of children for gain, politics, or fame. And my response, this is factually incorrect @Ryan Sheed. Alex Jones made limited statements questioning the shooting, which were wrong and for which he apologized and retracted repeatedly. He repeatedly acknowledged that children were murdered, though he claimed it was being politicized. Quote, the court decided this fact, end quote, wrong. There was never any trial on the merits because the judgment was a default verdict based on alleged violation of discovery obligations. There was no trial on the merits, despite evidentiary issues, legal questions, and potential bars of statute of limitations. And if false and/or defamatory statements qualify for eternal damnation and deplatforming, you surely support permanent banning of New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, et al., right?
So that's it. Alex Jones is back on Twitter. InfoWars is back on Twitter. Owen Schroyer is back on Twitter. And the biggest risk about having them back on Twitter is people are going to truly begin to understand that they have been lied to, manipulated, and played for fools for the last 5 years.
at least.
People are going to realize that what they were told was truth was in fact a bold-faced lie. Having Alex Jones and the populist movement back on Twitter, it might be the biggest risk to democracy since 2016. Risk as in democracy might run the risk of actually working properly when people can hear the dissident voices, when people can be exposed to information. And the gatekeepers that had hitherto controlled the lies, controlled the narrative, they're freaking out. They want to make believe there's a risk of violence when in reality, in my humble opinion, the only risk of violence comes from them. They are losing control of the narrative, and people are going to realize, truly understand the degree to which they are liars, depraved, dishonest, propagandists. And by the way, if you're so scared of Alex Jones,
Don't go on Twitter?
and if you are sincerely, genuinely afraid of Alex Jones and the things you think that he said, go look into it yourself. Trust but verify. Go verify everything I have said in this video. I've had Alex Jones on the channel multiple times. I've been on InfoWars multiple times. I even hosted InfoWars once. I remember what I once thought of Alex Jones based on what the media said. I remember being fearful to have Alex Jones on the first time because I thought he was the devil incarnate. He's actually a genuinely good person. And in as much as he made mistakes about things he said about Sandy Hook, he apologized, he retracted, and he actually went on more of an apology tour than you'll see from anyone else. Do you see Rachel Maddow going on an apology tour talking about how they were wrong about the jab?
Nope.
Do you see Potato Head Brian Stetler go on an apology tour about what he said about Nicholas Salmon?
Nope.
Do you see CNN, MSNBC, New York Times getting yeeted from social media for lies, disinformation that they have spouted repeatedly that they have barely even corrected? New York Times still has that article about how Brian Sicknick was murdered by a bunch of Trump supporters, and they still have that article with that headline on the internet. The people feigning the outrage are themselves the liars, and the rest of the people are soon going to realize that. And with that said, people, you know what to do. If you like my stuff, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you want to find me and support the work we do, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. On Rumble, Viva Frei. On X, Twitter, the Viva Frei. And fair warning, I'm a little bit saucy on Twitter. So with that said, everybody, now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!
If you're unvaccinated, you have a much higher chance of getting this newly transmissible variant we had never seen before a couple of weeks ago. And it's the unvaccinated people who it's going to make sick. And we really just cannot afford for you to have to go to the hospital right now. I mean, looking all around the country, depending on where you live, there is a very good chance there's no room for you in the hospital right now if you need to go. And if you can somehow get a bed because you got COVID and you got sick from it because you weren't vaccinated, if you are able to get yourself into a bed, you're going to be filling a bed that somebody else really needs.